Dear friends, welcome to Magdala, crossroad of the Jewish and Christian history. What do we know about Magdala? This is an ancient town of Magdala, began in the Hellenistic period and grew to the thriving fishing village by the time the Romans invaded in 67 AD. Situated at the base of Mount Abel, along commercial trade route, the Via Maris, this town was buried until 2009. Today, Magdala has come to life again. Archaeological discovery indicates the presence of an observant Jewish community in Magdala. It is here where Jesus likely taught the multitudes and healed the afflicted, including a woman who made her hometown famous, Mary Magdalene. Today, local and international visitors come to appreciate history and faith traditions, making Magdala a crossroad of the Jewish and Christian history, past and present. First century synagogue. The Magdala synagogue was discovered in 2009, only 30 centimeters beneath the surface. This is the oldest synagogue excavated in the Galilee and one of the 7 first-century synagogues in Israel. Coins excavated in the synagogue date between 5th and 63 AD. A coin minted in 29 AD leaves the impression of Jesus teaching in the synagogue during his public ministry, as we see from the book of Matthew chapter 4 verse 23 or from the book of Mark chapter 1 verse 39. What can we talk about the archaeological part? The mosaic and frieze reveal the Greco-Roman influence in the Herodian period. A small mosaic room on the southern side of the synagogue, which we have seen, was likely here the Torah scroll was stored in the center of the synagogue stood, the unique Magdala stone. The Magdala stone is one of the unique finds in the synagogue, believed to be holder of the Torah and Prophet scrolls. It represents the Temple of Jerusalem. The oldest carved 7-branched menorah flanks one side of the stone. It is a tripod base similar to the menorah image found on a wall in the burnt house of Herodian quarter in Jerusalem. Indicate likely authenticity of its replication of the menorah in the temple. The rosette design on the top, which we have seen also, represent the veil before the Holy of Holies. The backside offers an image of fiery chariot to represent divine presence in the Holies. Now, as you have seen, we can talk about the Duke in Altum. Duke in Altum commemorates the public life of Jesus. Inside the chapel, we have the women atrium features 8 pillars, 7 representing women in the Bible who followed Jesus, well, the enlightened women of faith across all the time. We have 4 mosaic chapels. Each chapel has enough room for 30 people and has an expressive mosaic depicting biblical event near the Sea of Galilee. We have the Fishers of Men chapel, which is we found in the book of Matthew chapter 4 verse 90. We also have the chapel of the Mary Magdalene, which we read from the book of Luke chapter 8 verse 2. We also have on Walking on the Water Chapel, which we read from the book of Matthew chapter 14 verse 30 to 31. We also see the chapel of the fishers of men, which I have already mentioned, but we also have the daughters of Jairus chapel. Outside, what we have not seen, we also have the Encounter Chapel, located on the marketplace for the 1st century port. The Encounter Chapel is modeled after the structure of the Magdala 1st century synagogue. The chapel features a beautiful mural-side painting of the encounter between Jesus and the Hemorrhagian woman, as we see in the book of Mark chapter 5 to 25. The other chapel we see is the encounter of Jesus in the disciples, where he stops the heavy waves in the sea and calls Peter. Now we are inside the church, which basically represents the public ministry of Jesus. The altar, which is a symbol of a boat, which in the boat we remember few aspects of Jesus. Moment where he preached well on the boat. Moment when he tells Peter, when he tells the disciples to cast into the deep. And they got many fish, as we also read in the Gospel of John. So in summary, it is important, as we are also celebrating Pope Francis, to quote him on what he would say about Mary Magdalene. Pope Francis, he consistently highlighted Mary Magdalene as a profound symbol of Christian hope and divine mercy. In his teaching, he emphasized her transformation from sorrow to joy and her pivotal role as the first witness to the resurrection. Pope Francis also saw Mary Magdalene as apostle of hope. Actually, we can remember in May 17, 2017, in his general audience, Pope Francis described Mary Magdalene as the apostle of hope. Pope Francis noted that Jesus' personal call to her in the garden after his resurrection exemplifies God's intimate care for each individual. These were the Pope's remarks. There is someone who knows us, who sees our suffering and delusion, who is moved by us and who calls us by name. Pope further explained that Mary Magdalene's encounter with the risen Christ transformed her grief into joy, symbolizing the profound change that hope in Christ brings to rebirth. On this particular day, we can also remember in 2016, Pope Francis elevated the feast of Mary Magdalene. Recognizing her significant role in the early church, Pope Francis elevated the memorial of St. Mary Magdalene from a memorial to a feast day in the church liturgical calendar. This decision underscored her importance as the first witness in the resurrection and as a true authentic evangelizer. The move also serves to highlight the dignity of women in the church and the central message of the divine mercy. We also see that Pope Francis emphasized Mary Magdalene as a model of transformation. Pope Francis often reflected on Mary Magdalene's transformation through divine mercy. He emphasized that her encounter with Jesus led to a profound personal change, illustrating the conversion is not merely about personal change, but about entering God's great reality shaped by love, he stated. Jesus healed her with mercy and she changed. The mercy brought her into God's dream and gave new purpose to her journey. Through this teaching, Pope Francis portrays Mary Magdalene as a beacon of hope, illustrating how personal encounter with Christ can lead to transformation and a renewed sense of purpose. As we celebrate Pope Francis, I feel that this is a very important aspect to think and meditate on, as he has also left us a very good gift during this year of the Jubilee of Hope, that hope does not disappoint. May, as we celebrate this feast, also pray for his soul and ask God to give him eternal rest. Thank you very much.